It was Inauguration Day. And Abraham Lincoln stepped out and looked out over the vast crowd of people. And for just a minute, he was overcome with the thought of all that had happened in the last 4 years. You see, his first inauguration speech was pleading with the South not to leave, saying we don't need a civil war, it's going to be okay. But the South seceded. Hundreds of thousands of men had died in the last 4 years. And now the South was reeling. There was no way they were going to win the war. It was going to be wrapped up in just a matter of months. Lincoln was victorious. This was his chance to beat his breast, to raise his hands in victory, to say, I told you so. But instead, he gives one of the most beautiful inauguration addresses ever. I'm just going to read you parts of it, not go through the whole thing. But in the second paragraph of his speech, he talks about 4 years ago. And he said there was an impending civil war. He says, all dreaded it, all sought to avert it. While the inaugural address was being delivered from this place, devoted altogether to saving the Union without war, insurgent agents were in this city seeking to destroy it without war, seeking to dissolve the Union, to divide its effects by negotiations. Both parties depreciated war, but one of them would rather make war than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And war came. Lincoln is saying one group said, we will divide us, and if it takes a war, so be it. And another group said, we will not be divided. If we have to go through a war to do it, we're going to preserve this country. And then Lincoln says 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest, and all knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the object for which the insurgents would rend the Union, even by war. There's an ironic, false narrative that has been shared that the Civil War was not fought over slavery, that it was fought over states' rights. And while I don't want to get into it too much, if you just read several of the declarations of secession from states like Texas, Alabama, Georgia, you will find that in their own words, they say we are fighting for slavery. After they lost the war, it was politically incorrect to say they were fighting for slavery, so the narrative was twisted and changed to say we were fighting for our freedom. The North, it was the war of northern aggression. They invaded us. They were forcing us, but that is not the case. And even here in this primary document, Abraham Lincoln is saying this war was all about slavery. And then he talks about the irony of a civil war. He says each side looked for an easy triumph, and the result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible and prayed to the same God. Each invokes his aid against the other. And then Lincoln says something very interesting. He says, it may seem strange that any man should dare ask a just God for assistance in wringing bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But let us not judge, that we not be judged. You see, Lincoln is standing on the moral high ground. And he's like, we prayed to God, they prayed to God. And he could easily have said, and how could they pray to God? For God to help them continue slavery. But he says, it may seem strange, but let's not judge. Okay, this is not the time to judge. He says the prayers of both could not be answered, and the prayers of neither have been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. And then towards the end he continues. He says, fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet even if God wills that this continue until all the wealth piled up by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn by the lash shall be paid by another drawn by the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so it must be true. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Lincoln has this brilliant thought, and he says, what if the price that we are paying for this war is the same amount of wealth that was stacked up by these slaves? What if every drop of blood shed by the slaver's whip will be equal to the drops of blood shed by this war? And he says, if that's the case, and if it has to go on longer, then God's judgments are true. He's saying we deserve this because of the evil of slavery. And what's crazy about this, he's not just saying the South deserves this. He's saying we. Because Lincoln knows American history. He knows that while the South perpetuated slavery and benefited economically, the North allowed it to continue. The North compromised and said, okay, well, all right, you can still keep it. And he says, we are both paying the price. And then Lincoln does a brilliant thing to end this speech. He says, with malice towards none and charity towards all. You see, this is him saying, let's not hate the South. Let's not turn them into villains. Let's not punish them. With malice towards none, with charity towards all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive to finish the work we are in. What is our work, Mr. President? What should we be doing? He says to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and orphan. He says now's the time to take care of the wounded, the widows and the orphans, because there's a lot of them. And to do all which may achieve a just and lasting peace among ourselves and all nations. And what's amazing about this story, like he gives this speech that's all about forgiveness, and it's all about understanding, and it's all about inspiring us to do what is right and to take care of people. And at the end of this speech, it had been really cloudy that day. The clouds parted and a ray of sunshine, just a big streaming of ray, hit Lincoln right in the face, and his face glowed. Everyone in the crowd saw it. It was like the favor of God said, this man is right. You are blessed. Lincoln had a rough life. He had a rough marriage. He had a rough presidency. And in a few short days, he would be killed by an assassin. But in that moment, as he was speaking the gospel of forgiveness and love and unity, it's like the very hand of God reached out and touched him and said, well done, my good and faithful servant. Later that day, Lincoln talked to a reporter, and he was almost giddy. He was like, did you see the sun? Did you see that? And this man who went through so much sorrow and heartache during the Civil War was cheered and applauded by his people, was approved by his God. And his message echoes to us today. The people we disagree with politically, it's very easy to demonize them and vilify them and just say they're bad thugs and they're awful people, they're racist, they're evil. And Lincoln's like, we can't judge. Because if we judge, then they will judge us. Instead, we need to go with malice towards none, with charity for all, and take care of people. See, America is all about freedom, about justice, about our ideals. But if we use our freedom selfishly, we're wasting it. We have the freedom of religion to share our faith. We have the freedom of speech to encourage each other. We have the freedom of press to put words into print like what I just read to you that can echo for eternity, to encourage people to be better people. We have the freedom to get together. We have the freedom to make America a better place. And that's what our freedom is for. And that's why it's so important to be brave. We can't be brave to avoid the bad stuff. We need to be brave to step into the good. America has been given a great opportunity, and we are called to be a light of hope and of freedom for the whole world. And that happens every single day when you and I stand up for what is good, for what is right, for what is kind. God has blessed America, and God will bless America. But he blesses America through you when you stand up and do the right thing. So today, listen to Abraham Lincoln. Let the malice out of your heart. Fill it up with love for everyone. And go out there and make America a good place. God bless you, and God bless America.